January 19, 1945. The night began not with sound, but with a texture and almost palpable stillness that settled over the western Pacific like a thin veil of cold silk. At 22:11 hours, the moon had not yet risen above the horizon, leaving the sky a deep, unbroken void. Over the island chain stretching from Luzon to Formosa, faint layers of mist drifted between the clouds, illuminated only by scattered fires below burning fuel depots, silent wreckage, and the last traces of the day's bombardment. Far above that darkness, where even the wind hesitated, a black shape cut across the sky without a glimmer of reflection. Its form was almost predatory, with wings curved like a hawk's and twin engines whispering through the thin air. This was the Northrop P-61 Black Widow, an aircraft designed not merely to fly through darkness, but to command it. Inside the cockpit, the crew worked in muted coordination, surrounded by the soft glow of instruments shielded beneath hooded lamps. Behind them, the powerful SCR-720 radar pulsed with an almost heartbeat-like rhythm, steady, confident, unwavering. That sound, faint but constant, represented the symbolic heartbeat of American industry. Inside every radar sweep existed the echo of a nation that had learned to turn technology into survival. It was the sound of electricity humming through copper coils manufactured by thousands of hands. A sound no Japanese bomber crew ever expected would become the last thing they never heard. For the Japanese units preparing for a night flight from Formosa, the world below seemed quiet, manageable, predictable. Since the opening months of the war, Japanese crews had grown accustomed to American night fighters being either absent or ineffective. Reports circulated within their ranks declaring the P-61 too heavy, too slow, and too complicated to pose a meaningful threat. Tradition had taught them that darkness was their ally. They had flown moonlit attacks on Chinese airfields, shadow convoys in the Indian Ocean, and slipped between Pacific islands with little more than the crackle of distant ground-based searchlights to disturb them. Japanese pilots believed that Americans relied too much on brute force, on waves of daylight bombers, on mass formations, on the raw volume of their production lines. But night remained the one domain where precision and experience mattered more than sheer numbers. And so, as the first of 4 Japanese bombers rolled across the tarmac, their engines vibrating through steel and earth, the crews felt a familiar confidence. The air was cool. The stars were dim. The moon had not yet risen. Conditions were ideal. They expected a long, undisturbed passage over the sea. They expected shadows to conceal them. They expected to dictate the rhythm of the night. What they did not expect was that an aircraft they considered slow and clumsy would, within 80 minutes, erase 4 of their bombers without ever being seen its weaponry. Radar and silence converging into an aerial hunting method so effective that even captured Japanese pilots later refused to believe it had been done by one machine. Yet history is often rewritten in moments when confidence meets innovation. P-61 descended slowly through a bank of clouds, its dark camouflage blending perfectly into the black horizon. Below, drifting like pale scars across the ocean, were the faint silhouettes of Japanese bombers Nakajima Ki-49s venturing south toward American lines. Their formation was loose, built on the assumption that the night sky guaranteed protection. Inside the P-61's rear compartment, the radar operator monitored the sweep. The symbolic heartbeat continued soft pulses of industrial electricity echoing through the fuselage. This recurring sound served as the script symbol, a mechanical assurance representing the depth and reach of American democracy. Every pulse stood not only for detection, but for the thousands of workers, engineers, and technicians whose labor allowed the Black Widow to exist at all. In its soft rhythm lay the ball. Truth of American abundance, vast resources filtered through the hands of individuals, all moving toward one purpose. The first contact appeared sharply a solid return moving at consistent speed. It was unmistakably a bomber. Range, 8 miles. Altitude, 12,000 feet. Direction, Southeast. The Japanese airmen in that bomber felt none of this. Their world was defined by the rumble of their engines and the cold air leaking through the fuselage seams. They believed themselves alone in the sky. Their navigator traced lines on the chart, illuminated by red light. Their gunners scanned empty darkness, seeing nothing but wind-blurred starlight. The night belonged to them in the same way it had for years, but the P-61 was built to remake the night. The moment the bomber stabilized its heading, the Black Widow closed distance. Its engines ran low and smooth, tuned for quiet approach. Its crew spoke without speaking, each motion refined through countless hours of coordination. The pilot eased the throttle gently, allowing the aircraft to advance from beneath the bomber's tail, a blind zone in Japanese defensive coverage. Historical accounts from both sides of the war later revealed that Japanese bombers rarely expected an enemy fighter to approach silently from below. The tactic was predictable in daylight, but perilous at night. Only radar-equipped aircraft could attempt it with confidence. And in this theater, only one such machine roamed the darkness with lethal efficiency. At 800 yards, the P-61 leveled. No moonlight touched its wings. No reflection betrayed its presence. The Japanese crew continued their slow journey, unaware that within seconds, their aircraft's fate would seal a chapter of history. The pilot steadied his aim. The quad 20mm cannons beneath the fuselage pointed upward at an angle few aircraft could match. With a gentle trigger pull, the first burst erupted 4 streams of traceless destruction that tore through the bomber's underside. Fuel ignited instantly, blooming into a fireball that illuminated the clouds above. The bomber's silhouette shuddered, rolled, and vanished in a molten descent toward the ocean. The P-61 never slowed. Radar pulses continued their steady rhythm, heartbeat after heartbeat. Another blip emerged on the scope. Then a third. Then a fourth. In the span of 3 minutes, the Black Widow transitioned from hunter to predator. The Japanese formation, once moving in quiet cohesion, fractured into disarray. Their pilots struggled to understand what had happened. Reports from surviving Japanese diaries revealed genuine disbelief. No gunfire. No searchlights. No warning. Suddenly, one plane burned in the darkness. The remaining bombers attempted evasive maneuvers, banking away from their last known positions. But evasion required knowledge of the threat, and the P-61 remained unseen, moving silently through the night. Following radar guidance that turned invisible air into mapped terrain, the second bomber banked left, descending to 9,000 feet. The P-61 followed at a shallow angle, its engines whispering softly. At 600 yards, the Black Widow drifted upward, positioning behind the bomber's left wing. A short burst severed the bomber's control surfaces, sending it spiraling downward. No explosion followed, only the quiet, terminal descent of a mortally wounded aircraft. The Japanese crew still had not seen their attacker. The third bomber tried to climb, hoping altitude would save them. Heavy bombers climbed slowly, while the P-61, despite its bulk, retained far more power in its twin engines. It rose beneath the bomber, matching its ascent. The pilot waited for the radar operator's range count. He aligned the shot, firing only when the geometry became perfect. The cannon struck squarely along the fuselage. Debris scattered across the night. Flames consumed the bomber from cockpit to tail. Now only one bomber remained. The last Japanese crew entered panic. Their gunners fired blindly into the dark, believing an entire squadron of American fighters surrounded them. They could not fathom that one aircraft alone had completed such precision. Japanese doctrine relied heavily on the assumption that American pilots lacked night fighting finesse. Their training emphasized that American combat methods depended on mass and visibility, not subtlety or stealth. And yet here, in the ink-black hours, one P-61 moved like a shadow with engines. Its pilot trusted radar. Its operator trusted engineering. And both trusted the steady, mechanical heartbeat behind them, symbol of abundance, validation of strategy, proof of national capacity. The last bomber's pilot attempted a desperate dive. The P-61 entered pursuit, descending almost vertically, its airframe trembling from the stress. It closed distance in seconds. At 300 yards, the pilot squeezed another burst. The 20mm shell struck the bomber's right engine. A plume of fire jolted outward. The aircraft bucked violently, its dive becoming uncontrollable. It vanished into the clouds below. Silence returned. Across the span of 80 minutes, 4 bombers had disappeared. The Japanese crews never visually identified the attacker. Their reports, filed days later, described the event as a black ghost or a thunderbolt without light. Some Japanese officers assumed multiple P-61 squadrons were now deployed in the theater. Others believed the Americans had developed a new weapon capable of striking without warning. But the truth was simpler and more profound. One aircraft, one crew, one night. One heartbeat of radar repeating through darkness. As the P-61 turned westward, the ocean reflected faint traces of moonlight emerging from the horizon. Below, debris drifted like pale shadows across the water, remnants of machines built with meticulous craftsmanship. Undone by a single aircraft, the Japanese had underestimated. Historical analysis conducted after the war revealed the deeper implications. Japanese strategy in the late Pacific War relied heavily on nighttime operations, believing Allied forces lacked technology to detect them. Radar, once considered a theoretical advantage, had become a decisive tool. The P-61's presence transformed night skies from safe corridors into contested battlegrounds. Japanese pilots spoke of losing faith in the protective power of darkness. American reports documented a measurable decrease in night raids following P-61 engagements. The psychological impact was immense. Confidence faltered. Routes changed. Missions canceled. Even before Japan's industrial capacity collapsed, its airmen had begun to experience a deeper collapse, one of belief that the P-61's success did not lie in one pilot, nor in one radar system, nor in one chase through clouded air. Its victory rested on a singular truth, that American democracy, through sheer collective effort, could marshal the resources of a continent into weapons capable of reshaping the sky. The P-61's heartbeat, the soft, steady pulse of its radar echoed within every engagement. It symbolized the thousands of hands shaping copper, forging metal, assembling circuits, and believing that their work held meaning. Each pulse represented the countless individuals behind the front line. Men and women who worked factory floors at midnight, who shipped crates through icy rail yards, who tested electronics in dimly lit rooms. Their labor became the heart of the Black Widow, and in the final hours of that January night, as the P-61 crossed the coastline and its engines lowered to an idle hum, the radar heartbeat slowed. The crew breathed deeply, the stress of the mission melting into exhaustion. They knew that history had not always ignited battles. Darkness swallowed evidence. Silence hid accomplishments. Yet somewhere in the Pacific, 4 empty points on a map now marked the boundary between expectation and reality. And those empty points told a story. They revealed the moment when the Japanese airmen understood that the night was no longer theirs. They revealed the shift from technical confidence to dawning fear. They revealed the steady transformation of air combat from daylight formations to invisible duels where machines guided by pulses and echoes decided the fates of crews who never saw their attackers. As dawn crept across the ocean, the first traces of gold touched the P-61's wings. Its black fuselage shimmered softly, carrying scars of the hunt powder burns, streaks of oil, residue from cannon fire. Yet still the aircraft held its poise. Still the heartbeat pulsed. Still the symbol endured. The night had surrendered to morning. But the memory of those 80 minutes lingered like the scent of burnt cordite. In the quiet hum of the hangar where the P-61 finally rested. The heartbeat ceased only to begin again hours later, when mechanics powered the radar for the next mission. And so the cycle would repeat, night after night, pulse after pulse. A rhythm echoed not in one sky, but in 1,000 across oceans and continents, carried by the belief that democracy, when focused into purpose, could illuminate even the darkest hours. For in the end, freedom is not always loud. Sometimes it is a quiet pulse hidden inside a machine. Sometimes it is the soft glow of a radar screen. Sometimes it is the unseen hand guiding a fighter into the path of a bomber. And sometimes it is the certainty that even in darkness, someone stands watch, armed not just with weapons, but with the determination of millions. The Japanese could not believe one P-61 was hunting them. But belief is not required for truth. And truth, in those 80 minutes, shone brighter than the moon. The sky was a vast moonless void, thick as wet ink, heavy as the breath of an unseen predator. Only the faint, scattered shimmer of distant stars marked the boundary between earth and heavens. Far below, the black tide crawled toward the Philippine coast, carrying on its back the sounds of a distant war, muted artillery rumble, the thrum of ship engines, the whisper of warm Pacific winds pushing through palm fronds along the shoreline. At 2:11 hours, the night broke silently, subtly with the soft, gliding shadow of an aircraft that seemed to merge with the darkness itself. No navigation lights, no exhaust glow. Only the slightest shimmer along its wings revealed its presence. The locals never saw it. The Japanese search crews scanning the horizon never sensed it. Even the American ground patrols knew it only as a silhouette passing overhead like a migrating apparition. It was the Northrop P-61 Black Widow, America's first purpose-built night fighter. And on that night, it flew like the sky belonged to it alone. The aircraft's twin booms cut through humid air, its radar dish pulsing invisible waves forward into the void. Inside the cockpit, crew members watched luminous, green traces flicker across the cathode screen, ghostly signatures of movement that the human eye could never detect unaided. The aircraft hummed with electricity. Nothing in the Pacific could match it in its domain, the blackness between dusk and dawn. But at this moment, the Black Widow was not merely patrolling. It was hunting. The context of this night mattered far more than the silence suggested. For weeks, Japanese bomber units had launched desperate, nocturnal attacks against the assembling American convoys preparing to retake Luzon. Their targets, supply ships, troop carriers, oilers, field hospitals, anything that would slow the inevitable push toward Manila. These bombers flew low, trusting darkness to shield their approach, believing that American defenses were blind once the sun was gone. Their confidence grew with every raid that slipped through. Japanese airmen believed the night favored them. Their briefings repeated it. Their commanders emphasized it. In an era when radar was still mystifying to many on both sides, the idea that an American aircraft could see in total darkness seemed closer to a myth than military reality. And so, Japanese bomber crews took off with steady confidence. They expected a clear run. They expected American gunners to fire blindly. They expected the ocean and night sky to cloak them like loyal allies. But on January 5th, the sky had changed. The night had acquired new eyes. To the Black Widow's crew, the darkness carried meaning. Every faint echo on the radar was a clue. Every small distortion could be a target. The P-61's SCR-720 radar swept through the void with a mechanical heartbeat steady, assured, relentless. The faint pulse rhythm it emitted had become a symbolic sound aboard the aircraft, the recurring reminder that even in absolute blackness, American industry had found a way to illuminate the unseen. Each pulse represented technological abundance, the same industrial wheel that produced endless trucks, rifles, ship hulls, artillery rounds. And now on this night, it represented something more direct, dominance over the night. The Japanese could not hear that pulse. They could not detect the silent waves washing across their flight paths. They flew believing the darkness belonged to them. They did not know they were being watched long before they neared the coast. The first contact appeared as a faint, drifting speck on the radar screen. The P-61's pilot nudged the controls, descending slightly. The speck grew clearer, sliding across the phosphor glow like a lone shadow moving against the grain of night. Range, closing. Altitude, steady. Direction, inbound toward American shipping. A Japanese twin-engine bomber. The hunt had begun, thousands of feet ahead. The Japanese bomber crew sat relaxed inside their cramped fuselage. One man readjusted a scarf around his neck. Another checked the map under dim red light. Their engines droned with calm, unbroken rhythm. They expected nothing unusual. They believed they were shadows moving through a world, asleep. But the night was no longer sleeping, and the Black Widow was already behind them, silent as a stalking panther. Invisible as a passing cloud, the Japanese had no warning. Not a glimmer of moonlight. Not a flicker of exhaust flame. Not a hint of approaching death. The American pilot lined up the shot. The gunner tracked the bomber's tailplane. 4 powerful Hispano 20mm cannons waited in the belly turret, silent, cold, ready. At 2:19 hours, fire erupted. The night flashed white. The cannons spat thunder into the void. A cone of tracers tore through the dark as if ripping open a curtain. The Japanese bomber never had a chance. The first burst hit the right engine. The second burst struck the cockpit. Flames curled upward. Metals sheared apart. A trail of fire spiraled toward the sea. The bomber hit the water with a distant, muffled splash that no Japanese command post ever heard, and in the cockpit of the P-61, the radar pulse continued its unbroken rhythm, one more reminder of the abundance behind them. The unseen force that powered every round fired that night. The Black Widow did not linger. It banked sharply east, circling above American naval formations. Its radar resumed scanning the darkness with the same steady sweep, hunting for more shadows. Because Japanese intelligence had been wrong. Not one bomber. Not two. A whole wave had launched. They believed the Americans had no night defense. They believed they could strike with impunity. They believed radar-guided interception was impossible. And in 80 minutes, the Black Widow would destroy those beliefs entirely. 20 minutes later, the radar operator leaned forward. Another faint smear appeared on the screen, this one erratic. Wobbling slightly against the glow. A second bomber. This one flew lower, barely above wave-top height, attempting to use the ocean's curvature as a shield. Its crew believed this old trick made them invisible. They had used it successfully before. They expected American ships to spot them only when it was too late. They had no idea an aircraft high above them could trace their movement with ease. The P-61 descended again, smooth, patient, deliberate. The night below grew thicker. Humidity clung to the wings. Salt mist whispered against the fuselage. The P-61's engines purred with confidence, every cylinder firing in perfect sequence. Then visual contact. A dim blur. A darker shadow within the darkness. The gunner aligned the turret. He followed the shadow until it sharpened into a shape, wings, tail. Twin props turning steadily. Range closed. Indicators aligned. Breath held. The cannons thundered again. Bright flashes split the night, illuminating the bomber's fuselage for a fraction of a second before tearing a gaping wound through its center line. The aircraft pitched violently, losing altitude faster than its crew could react. The left wing tore free. The fuselage rolled, spun, broke apart. The pieces struck the ocean like falling stones. No survivors. No distress call. No trace for the next bomber crews to warn them. The P-61 climbed again, its radar pulse steady, unbothered, relentless. 2 bombers down. More approaching. By now, Japanese bomber crews entering the area noticed something strange. Their comrades weren't responding on the radio. No formation check-ins. No altitude confirmations. No landing reports. The silence grew heavier with every passing minute. Some chalked it up to equipment failures. Some assumed their friends had simply flown beyond range, but a few felt the sharp chill that comes when superstition creeps through the cracks of discipline. The night suddenly felt different. Too quiet. Too vast. Too watching. They had no idea that the Black Widow, was already closing in on the third bomber. This one flew higher, 8,000 feet, believing altitude was safer, that American gunners would never see them from below. Its crew scanned the darkness, but saw only emptiness. The night looked calm. The air felt still. Their mission seemed routine, but far behind them, an American aircraft glided silently with the patience of a hunting eagle. Radar tracked them flawlessly. The pilot inched closer, adjusting his throttle to match their pace. No one inside the Japanese bomber sensed the thing at 3:02 hours. The Black Widow positioned itself perfectly, behind the bomber almost close. Enough for the crew to see the faint outline of its nose that they turned around. They never did. The American pilot squeezed the trigger. A storm of 20 millimeters fire leapt from the P-61's belly. The bomber jolted. Its right wing erupted into flame. Its fuselage buckled. The aircraft lurched violently to the side, trailing burning fuel like a bright wound across the night sky. Flames lit the interior for a brief, terrible moment. Then darkness swallowed it as the bomber dove in a fatal spiral. It hit the ocean seconds later. A brief wash of flame spread, hissed, died. 3 bombers gone. Still no warning transmitted. Japanese pilots inbound had no idea. They were flying into death. The P-61 resumed its weaving patrol, radar sweeping, engine rumbling through the humid Philippine night. The symbolic pulse from its SCR-720 radar remained constant, steady as a heartbeat. To the Americans aboard, it embodied more than technological advantage. It symbolized home, industry, production, a nation whose factories produce radars, bullets, engines, fuel, and hope at a scale impossible for the shrinking Japanese war economy to match. For Japanese crews that night, this unseen pulse meant something else entirely, a threat they could not perceive, a hunter they could not evade, an opponent who saw them without being seen. The night had turned against them. The 4th bomber flew, even lower than the others, barely skimming treetops near the northern coast. In battlefield letters and oral histories, soldiers spoke of ammunition with reverence, not as mere brass and powder, but as the physical representation of home. Each round carried the echo of factories in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Illinois, places where everyday citizens labored through blackout nights, forging the material spine of democracy. When the soldier inspected the battlefield that day, he found his Thompson steaming faintly in the cold, its patchwork frame scarred but intact. Snowflakes settled on the receiver, melting instantly from residual heat. The weapon that engineers once dismissed as unreliable had proven decisive, not because it was flawless, but because its wielder refused to surrender to limitation. In the days that followed, the story spread quietly through platoons and companies, gaining a mythic edge. Some believed the weapon was magical. Others believed the soldier possessed uncanny marksmanship. But those who studied the incident understood something simpler. In war, ingenuity often triumphs where engineering cannot. The Ardennes would continue to burn with conflict. But the memory of that morning lingered, a small reminder that in the vast machinery of World War II, individual moments of defiant courage still shape the outcome. And so, as this narration closes, we return to the symbolic object that framed the story, the .45 ACP cartridge, resting warm in a soldier's pocket, representing more than firepower. It represented a nation's promise that freedom, unlike tyranny, does not demand perfection. It demands resilience. It demands will. It demands the courage to stand with whatever tools remain, the spare parts. Thompson would eventually vanish into the quiet aftermath of war, its components scattered or lost. But its moment of truth survived, echoing in military studies, eyewitness accounts, and the unspoken pride of a soldier who refused to break. The snow melted. The forest healed. The war ended. But the idea endured. That democracy, like a mass-produced cartridge, is strongest not because it is flawless, but because millions stand ready to carry it forward. Its pilot believed terrain, masking would hide them from American observation. He believed the night protected them. He believed their mission would proceed as planned, but the Black Widow crew detected the bomber long before visual, contacted its propellers, giving off a faintly turned signature on radar as they disturbed the humid air around them. The P-61 descended into their altitude. The Japanese bomber's crew sensed nothing unusual. Not a flicker of light. Not a gust of displaced air. Not a hint of the predator stalking them above. Then, at 3:29 hours, the P-61 fired. Muzzle blasts lit the sky with violent brilliance. The bomber's tail disintegrated. Its left engine exploded. Flames clawed along the fuselage as gravity pulled the aircraft downward. The bomber hit a cluster of palm trees inland, silent to the ships below, but immediately visible as a faint orange glow spreading across the jungle night. 4 bombers gone. 80 minutes. No American losses. No Japanese survivors to tell the story. The Black Widow climbed gently, circling above the coast as the radar pulse continued its steady rhythm. Quiet, calm, triumphant, the night belonged to the Americans now.